A former soldier is ignored and looked down upon because of his war trauma, until one day he runs into a building after noticing something suspicious. When he comes out, he's approached by the media, and what happens next leaves him in shock. The buzz of the alarm went off at exactly 5 a.m. It wasn't necessary. Michael was already awake. As always, on the bottom bunk, he stared at the peeling ceiling of the shelter, one arm folded under his head, the other partially covering his eyes. The sheet barely reached his feet. The mattress creaked with every slight movement, a constant reminder that there was no comfort here, only tolerance. The dorm room was dark, save for the faint glow from the hallway light filtering through the half-open door. 3 beds to the left, 2 to the right. One man, Peterson, was snoring loudly. Another, already dressed in a faded army t-shirt, was packing his few belongings into a canvas duffel. No one spoke. There was nothing to say. Michael sat up slowly. His neck cracked. He was tense. He always was. He laced up his military boots with the same precise motion as every morning. His left ankle throbbed. Shrapnel the surgery couldn't remove, still buried deep. But the physical pain wasn't the heaviest weight he carried. He ran his hand over the stubble on his face and stared at the rusted locker in front of him. A cracked mirror was taped to the door. The reflection was familiar, yet distant. Hollow eyes, dull skin, the expression of someone who sees everything and feels nothing. He left the room without a sound. The shelter's hallway was narrow, with scuffed linoleum floors and the sharp scent of cheap disinfectant. As he descended the stairs, he passed Marta, a staff worker from the nonprofit. She held a clipboard and wore a shelter hoodie. She gave a quick smile, but didn't stop. "Morning, Sergeant," she said as she walked by. "Not a sergeant anymore," he muttered back. In the communal kitchen, a few other veterans stirred their coffee in silence. Plastic cups, stale toast. The TV played a muted local news segment. Michael grabbed a mug, poured himself a cup, and sat near the window. It was still dark outside. A bus passed, briefly lighting up his reflection in the glass. Behind him, someone coughed, a white-haired man with a vacant stare. Michael recognized him, but didn't know his name. Few people here exchanged names. Not out of hostility, but practicality. Like soldiers on patrol, knowing too much made everything harder in the end. As he raised the cup to his lips, it hit him. Out of nowhere. A narrow alley in Afghanistan. Adobe walls. The muffled chatter of an enemy radio. And then, the explosion. Shrapnel flying. A scream that wasn't his. That metallic taste in his mouth. Ramirez's body collapsing beside him. Michael blinked several times. His hand trembled slightly. He took a deep breath, set the mug down, and stared into it as if he could drown the memory there. He stood up. He always left before 7. Walked across the city looking for odd jobs. He'd cleaned restaurants, unloaded trucks, watched over abandoned warehouses. No steady pay, no contracts, but it kept his mind occupied. He wore the same coat every day, military issue, worn down, with frayed cuffs. A dark hood shadowed part of his face. On the streets, his steps were steady, but his eyes, always scanning, watching, assessing, an instinct he couldn't switch off. As he crossed the town square, a child on a swing followed him with her eyes. Michael noticed, looked away. He knew what people saw in him: distrust, fear, silent judgment. At the corner store, he picked up bread and milk. The cashier avoided eye contact. The security guard watched from by the door, still and silent. Michael felt the weight of his stare as he placed the items on the conveyor. "Shelter card," he said, handing it over. The girl swiped it. Said nothing. On the way out, a younger man in a light suit bumped into him, on purpose. Gave him a look of disdain. "Watch it, freak." Michael didn't respond. Just stood still, eyes fixed on the sidewalk. Part of him wanted to react. Another part had long since stopped fighting small battles. He returned to the shelter in the late afternoon, after a cleaning shift at a Chinese restaurant. He was exhausted. His hands smelled of disinfectant and grease. At the park, before heading to his room, he sat on his usual bench, leaned his elbows on his knees, and tossed breadcrumbs to the pigeons. Silent. Still. The sun was starting to dip behind the low city buildings. Children laughed in the distance. A dog barked. A woman pushed a stroller nearby. There, in that space between noise and solitude, Michael existed. No uniform, no mission, no country watching over him. Just a man trying to remember why he still woke up every morning. The autumn wind cut sharp that night. The park trees swayed in silence, shedding dry leaves onto the damp ground. Michael walked slowly, hands deep in his coat pockets, shoulders hunched. The restaurant shift had been long. His uniform still reeked of sweet and sour sauce, layered with hours of sweat and steam. The city seemed asleep, but something in the air felt wrong. It wasn't just the cold. It was a quiet tension, like the moments before a firefight. Michael knew that feeling well. He stopped at the corner by the shelter, watched the streetlights flicker. The sky, starless. A sharp crack echoed in the distance. Nothing unusual. Still, his pace quickened. As he turned the corner, he saw the smoke, thick, dark, pouring from the windows on the second floor of an old building, just 3 houses down from the shelter. One of the oldest apartment blocks in the neighborhood. The front door was wide open. Voices overlapped. Shouts. Panic. Michael broke into a run. With each step, the smoke thickened. The acrid smell of burning wood and melting plastic filled his nose. A crowd of neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk. A woman sobbed, waving her hands frantically in the air. 2 children stood barefoot, shivering in the cold. A man was recording with his phone. Has anyone called the fire department? Michael shouted. A nervous young man nodded. They're on the way, but there are people still inside. I think on the 3rd floor. Michael didn't respond. He sprinted toward the gate. The building's front door creaked, wide open. The hallway was choked with smoke, dense, almost solid. The lights flickered. The ceiling was starting to blacken. He took 2 steps back, soaked the apron in his backpack with water from his thermos, tied it over his face, and went in. The heat hit instantly, sticky on the skin, seeping into his bones. The staircase to the left still looked intact. He climbed quickly, hand on the metal railing. On the 2nd floor, a door slammed at the end of the hallway. Voices came from inside. Anyone there? He called. A muffled sound answered, children crying. Michael kicked the door. The latch gave on the 2nd try. The apartment was dark, thick with smoke. A woman sat on the floor, trying to shield 2 boys under a blanket. We're getting out. Now. He helped them up, scooping the smallest into his arms. The woman coughed uncontrollably. He guided them down the stairs, one arm wrapped around the 2 still walking. Once outside, he handed the child to a neighbor, then turned around and ran back in. There are more people inside, he shouted to the crowd. He climbed again. The 3rd floor stairs groaned under his weight. The ceiling popped and cracked. Michael pushed open a half-closed door. Inside, an elderly man leaned against the wall, gripping a walker. His breathing was shallow and labored. Let's go. Hold tight. Michael bent down, slid one arm under the man's legs, and lifted him over his shoulders. The heat was worse here. Each breath scorched his lungs. His throat felt raw. He staggered downward, his injured leg threatening to give way. On the 2nd step, he slipped and dropped to his knees. The old man cried out. Michael groaned, pushed himself up, and kept going until they were out of the building. He didn't wait even 30 seconds. He went back in. By now, the screams were coming from above. Someone was pounding on a window. Glass shattered. Flames flared against the 2nd floor wall. The fire was spreading fast. Michael climbed a 4th time. The wet cloth over his face had dried. It was useless now. The smoke burned his eyes. A child's scream echoed from behind a closed door. He kicked it. Once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. The doorknob was hot. It seared his palm. He rammed it with his shoulder. The wood gave partially. He threw his whole weight against it. A bathroom. Small. In the corner, a little girl huddled, eyes wide in terror. It's okay. I'm here. He scooped her up, wrapping his own coat around her. She trembled in his arms, fingers clutching his chest. The way down was worse. The hallway shook. Pieces of the ceiling began to fall. A deep groan came from the 2nd floor. Michael moved faster. Just as he reached the door, a burning beam crashed inches from his foot. He jumped clear, the girl shielded in his arms. He dropped to his knees on the sidewalk. Someone pulled the girl from his arms, but he didn't see who. The world was spinning. His breathing was broken. He coughed, spitting black. His hands on the pavement. Soot covered his face. And a single tear, involuntary, slipped from the corner of his right eye. Behind him, the building burned. In the distance, fire truck sirens wailed. But in that moment, no one moved. Not even Michael. Sitting on the sidewalk, eyes closed, he felt something he hadn't known in years. Usefulness. The red strobe light sliced through the early morning darkness like a raw nerve. 3 fire trucks were already on the scene, and paramedics swarmed the sidewalk, carrying children wrapped in thermal blankets and stunned adults with vacant eyes. Michael was still on his knees, breath shallow and ragged. He tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't cooperate. He coughed hard, his trembling hands bracing against the concrete. One of the medics ran over. "Sir, can you hear me? Can you breathe?" Michael nodded, eyes half shut. A blanket was draped over his shoulders. An oxygen mask pressed against his face. The medic's hands searched for his pulse. The world around him sounded muffled, like he was underwater. Screams, sirens, hurried footsteps, distant echoes. "He went in there?" "4 times," a woman shouted, pointing. "He brought out my daughter. She was trapped." Across the street, a young man clutched his phone with shaky hands. He had recorded everything. Michael's dash into the building, the rescues, the final fall with the child in his arms. The video hit social media before sunrise. In less than 24 hours, it was headline news on local sites. Homeless veteran rescues 8 from apartment fire. Forgotten hero acts before firefighters arrive. Invisible man becomes symbol of true courage. News outlets aired clips from the footage. One even recreated the event with animated graphics. The images repeated, the silhouette disappearing into smoke, arms cradling a child, the collapse on the pavement. His face blackened with soot, eyes shut, body slumped. For the first time, journalists crowded the shelter. Marta, stunned, tried to organize the interviews. Michael resisted. He didn't want attention. He wasn't looking for praise. Still, he agreed to sit down for one report. The TV crew set up makeshift lighting in the meeting room. Michael wore his gray coat, hands resting on his knees. The reporter offered a rehearsed look of empathy. The camera rolled. "Mr. Hall, you've become a symbol of bravery. What were you feeling in that moment?" Michael took his time. He breathed in. His voice was low, steady. "I wasn't trying to feel anything. I just acted. You saved 8 people. Do you see yourself as a hero?" He looked away, jaw tightening. "I did what I was trained to do." He paused. "For the first time in a long while. I felt useful again." The room fell silent. The cameraman lowered his lens a touch. Someone cleared their throat off-screen. That line spread online like wildfire. Through veteran forums, community pages, support networks. Comments poured in. Fundraisers popped up. 2 days later, Marta found him in the dining hall. "Someone's here to meet you," she said. In the next room, a man in a dark suit was waiting. Tan skin, neatly trimmed beard, upright stance. He shook Michael's hand firmly. "Colonel David Rourke," he said. "I heard what you did." Michael simply nodded. "I run a private security firm here in the city. A lot of us come from the same place you do. I've got an opening. Set hours, fair pay. I know this might not be what you pictured for your life right now, but it could be a fresh start." Michael kept his eyes on the floor for a moment. "I don't know if I'm ready." Rourke leaned in slightly. "Anyone who walks into a burning building to save strangers is more ready than they think." Michael nodded slowly. The handshake that followed was quiet, but it said enough. The next week, the shelter helped him file for his long-overdue benefits. A crowdfunding campaign, started by local residents, raised enough money to cover months of physical therapy and weekly PTSD counseling. The first session was tense. Michael kept his arms crossed the entire time. But he went back the next week. And the one after that. He got a small subsidized apartment. 2 rooms. A view of the park. On the first day, he carefully organized the closet. Every fold, every piece, placed with military precision. A ritual. A way to restore order to the chaos. In the park, kids recognized him. One of them, Lila, the little girl he'd saved from the bathroom, ran up with a crayon drawing in hand. It showed a man holding a girl, flames in the sky behind them. In the corner, in crooked block letters. "Thank you, Uncle Michael." He held the paper without saying a word. Sat on the bench. Lila climbed up beside him, resting her head against his arm. There, in that silence, something began to shift. And for the first time in a long while, silence wasn't the enemy anymore. On Monday, Michael arrived at the security firm headquarters 15 minutes early. He wore the freshly pressed navy blue uniform shirt and pants with sharp creases, ironed by hand. His boots were clean, laces tightly tied. He entered quietly. Waited. The building was simple, but well maintained. 4 rooms, a reception area, and a wall lined with framed photos of veteran team members. One of them greeted him with a nod. Michael nodded back, restrained. In the instruction room, he received his first assignment: light patrols at a logistics center. No one spoke loudly. No one laughed too hard. Everyone respected the invisible boundaries. There was a code there, and he knew that code. Still, the first days were hard. His body responded sluggishly. The legs still ached on stairwells. At night, sleep remained fractured. Sometimes he woke up with a clenched fist, short of breath. But now, at least, there was a purpose waiting in the morning. On Friday, during lunch, one of his co-workers left a protein bar on his table. Said nothing, just left it there. Michael looked at the package, then at the man, who was already walking away. He lifted his chin slightly. A minimal gesture, but understood. In therapy, he still didn't say much. Sessions took place in a discreet building 3 blocks from his new apartment. The therapist, a woman with a calm voice and steady gaze, avoided direct questions. She let him fill the space, slowly. In the 3rd session, he mentioned Ramirez. For the first time, he didn't say the name. Just, he was my patrol partner. We slept at the same post. He kept a picture of his daughter on his helmet. Kept saying he'd take her to Disney when we got back. The therapist didn't interrupt. Michael sat in silence for several seconds. The explosion was on his side. He didn't have a chance. His voice faltered, but he didn't look away. I was close enough to hear it, but too far to do anything. His hands, resting on his knees, slowly curled into fists. The therapist just wrote something down. Michael took a deep breath, raised his eyes. I've never told anyone that. At the park, the next Sunday, Lila was waiting on the same bench. She brought another drawing. Michael in uniform, surrounded by red hearts. My mom says you're kinda like a real guard now. Sort of, he replied, a faint smile forming. Lila climbed onto the bench, held out a sandwich. I made it with her. It's jelly. You like jelly? Michael took the sandwich carefully, as if it were too fragile for his calloused hands. Thank you. She didn't ask about the war, or the fire. She just told him, with excitement, that she'd lost 2 teeth that week and that her front tooth was wiggly now. Michael listened, gave her his full attention. The city had changed too. At the bakery where he bought coffee, the clerk greeted him with, "Good morning, Mr. Hall," full name. Something that had never happened before. At the pharmacy, the cashier placed a healing ointment in his bag without charging him. "It's the least we can do," she said, offering no explanation. On the street, people met his eyes. Some smiled. Others just waved from afar. Small kindnesses, but real ones. During a patrol, a woman in the condo stopped him. "My nephew studies history. He saw you in the news. Said you're an example. Said, he wants to be like you." Michael stayed quiet for a moment, then said, "Tell him to study hard and take care of his own mind. Sometimes that's the toughest part." At home, the apartment was quiet, but now there were Lila's drawings on the wall. A rug bought with his first paycheck. A shelf with books, some about war, others for children. On the table, the same old radio. But now, turned on from time to time. The nights still brought shadows, but there were days with sun too. And for someone who spent so long trying only to survive, simply building a routine was, in itself, a kind of victory. The classroom was full. 30 chairs occupied by kids between 9 and 12, eyes wide open, colorful backpacks leaning against their sides. A poster on the wall read, "Local Heroes Week," with drawings of firefighters, nurses, and a scruffy bearded man holding a child in his arms. The face was unmistakable. Michael stood still for a moment at the classroom door. The principal introduced him enthusiastically, but he just nodded. He wore a plain shirt, dark pants, and clean boots. Silence settled over the room as he walked to the front. It took a moment for his voice to come out. "I'm not great with words." A few kids giggled softly. "I served in the military for many years. I saw some hard things. Came back, different. For a long time, I thought I didn't belong anywhere anymore." His eyes scanned the small faces in front of him, some curious, others respectful, none mocking. "Not long ago, there was a fire near the shelter where I was staying. I went in to help. Just did what anyone trained like me would have done. But that moment, it woke something up in me." A girl in the front row raised her hand. He gave her a small nod. "Were you scared?" Michael paused. "I was. I always am. But I've learned that fear doesn't stop you from acting. It just keeps you from forgetting." A boy in the back slowly raised his hand, hesitant. Are you afraid of dying? The room went still. Michael looked at the boy for a few seconds. His face was serious, sincere. I used to be more afraid of living, he said quietly. But not anymore. No one spoke after that. The teacher simply thanked him with a soft smile. Michael stepped down from the front of the class without hurry, his steps steady, but light. That night, at home, he was putting together a small wooden shelf. Screws lined up, his hands dusted with sawdust. A small potted plant sat beside him, freshly planted. In the back of the room, Lila's drawings were now in new frames. One of them, in tiny letters at the bottom corner, "You're my hero now, but you're also my friend." Michael adjusted the shelf against the wall, ran his hand slowly across its surface. He was quiet. Then, he picked up a small picture frame. An old photo. 3 soldiers in uniform, smiling at the camera. Next to it, he lit a candle. The face lit by the flame wasn't that of a soldier on watch anymore, but of a man at peace. The next morning, the park was already full. Kids were running between the benches. Lila was out front, followed by 2 other girls. Michael walked beside them, carrying a bag with juice and cookies. He wore a simple cap, his eyes shaded from the morning sun. A boy passed by, recognized him, and waved. Michael waved back. He no longer avoided eye contact. His body still carried scars, but there was something different in the way he moved, like someone who belonged to the place he stood. In the center of the park, next to the old bench where he used to feed the pigeons, he sat down slowly. Lila climbed up beside him and handed him another drawing. It was a clear sky, a man with open arms. Behind him, a green tree. On the ground, a star-shaped shadow. Michael smiled. Not like a soldier, not like a survivor, but like a whole man. And for the first time in a long time, he stayed there, with no reason to leave in a hurry.